Helen Mitchell's house sat quietly on a modest street in Portland, Oregon. It was the kind of home that held its history in every creak of its aged wooden floors and the gentle flutter of lace curtains swaying in the morning breeze. The sun poured through tall windows, casting warm pools of light across the kitchen table where Helen often sat. At 74 years old, Helen was the very picture of quiet strength and enduring order. Her home was simple but meticulously cared for. Every surface gleamed faintly from years of careful cleaning. The faint scent of lemon polish still lingered in the air, a subtle reminder of her dedication. It was a ritual that comforted her, a small anchor in a world that often felt uncertain. Helen had been an accountant for nearly 4 decades, working for the Portland School District before retiring 6 years ago. That career had shaped not only her skills, but the very way she moved through life, precise, disciplined, and unyieldingly careful. Even now, long after leaving the office, Helen maintained habits others might find excessive. Every receipt was tucked into labeled envelopes, every bank statement was printed, hole-punched, and filed away in orderly rows. A drawer full of yellowed ledgers sat in her office, relics from years gone by. She didn't hoard trinkets or souvenirs, she hoarded order. That order was her armor against the unpredictability of life, and she wore it with quiet pride. For Helen, money was never just currency. It was the sum of all her sacrifices. Working overtime instead of taking holidays, driving through icy rainstorms to ensure payrolls were accurate, wearing the same coat far beyond its prime, clipping coupons meticulously, and crafting meals from leftovers. Each dollar in her savings account was a monument to her independence, a shield against the vulnerability of needing to ask for help. Her modest sedan bore the dents and scratches of years, just like the clothes she wore, practical, durable, and unassuming. Her husband's passing 6 years prior had left a silence in the house that was thick and heavy. Grief, Helen learned, was not a wave, but a slow erosion, a series of tiny, almost imperceptible cracks that reshaped the foundation of her daily existence. She coped, as she always had, through structure and routine. Organizing her life became a way of holding herself together. Into this quiet life came her son, Michael. Just graduated from college, full of restless energy and hopes for the future, he moved back into the small house, claiming a corner of the spare bedroom as his own. At first, Helen welcomed the noise, the sound of music spilling from his speakers, the clatter of sneakers by the door, the occasional laughter echoing through the rooms. It was a welcome disruption to the long, slow days of solitude. Michael was lively and kind. He offered to do dishes, brought home groceries, and often kissed her gently on the cheek each morning before heading out to the local coffee shop where he said he was working on his next big idea. Helen didn't pry. She believed in giving space, trusting that time would reveal the truth of a person. But beneath her calm exterior, she was always watching, always waiting, a habit honed by years balancing ledgers and tracking every cent. Then came the strange transactions. They were small and scattered. A $90 charge at a convenience store Helen had never stepped foot in, a $73 rideshare bill on a day she'd stayed home, a $120 transfer labeled vaguely as an external payment. At first, she thought they might be mistakes, glitches in the system, but instinct whispered otherwise. Helen did not speak to Michael about it. Instead, she took out her yellow legal pad and began a silent ledger of these anomalies. She compared bank statements against her carefully logged records, highlighting discrepancies. Quietly, she tightened security on her accounts, changed passwords, and set up alerts, all without making a scene. This was not paranoia. It was an act of self-preservation. Helen's finances were the physical embodiment of a lifetime of hard work and sacrifice. She could not allow them to be diminished, not by chance, not by negligence, and certainly not by someone she loved. Evenings grew tense, but Helen remained composed. She would prepare Michael's favorite meals, pour orange juice into his chipped glass, and listen as he spoke passionately about his tech startup ambitions. Yet, as she nodded politely, her mind was elsewhere, tallying figures, watching patterns, calculating risks. The house was filled with the quiet hum of daily life, but beneath that hum, an invisible current of unease pulsed. Helen felt it most sharply when she caught Michael's fleeting glances at her laptop or when his fingers hesitated over the keyboard as if searching for something hidden. She knew this was no longer just about money. It was about trust, respect, and boundaries. One night, as the Portland sky deepened into twilight and the gentle breeze rustled the maple leaves outside, Helen sat alone at the kitchen table, a single cup of tea steaming beside her. She traced the lines of her meticulous notes, the sums of withdrawals, the dates, the locations. The quiet house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground of unspoken truths. And in that stillness, Helen made a decision, not out of anger or betrayal, but out of a profound understanding that love sometimes meant protecting oneself first. The next steps would be deliberate, measured, and irrevocable. Hey everyone, I'd love to hear from you. Please drop a comment below and let me know where you're from. Sharing your thoughts is totally free and means the world to me. When you like, share, comment, and subscribe, you're not just supporting this channel, you're helping it grow and reach more amazing people like you. By engaging, you help create a community where we can all connect, inspire each other, and keep bringing you more great content. So don't be shy. Hit that like button, share with your friends, leave your comment, and subscribe for more. It's easy, free, and it truly makes a difference. Thank you so much for being here and for your support. It means everything. That night, Helen Mitchell was sitting quietly in her living room when her phone buzzed sharply against the wooden side table. The glow from the old lamp cast soft shadows on the walls, the house wrapped in its usual calm. But this alert wasn't routine. It was a stark warning from her bank. Unusual login detected on your account. Access from an unrecognized device at 12:37 a.m. Helen's breath caught. Midnight? Who would be logging in at that hour? Her fingers trembled just slightly as she made her way to the dusty old desktop in the corner of the room, the computer she still trusted more than any smartphone or tablet. Its screen flickered to life with a familiar hum. Helen signed in carefully, her mind racing, knowing this was not the time for mistakes. The account activity page unfolded before her eyes, and there it was, a string of small transactions she had not authorized. A $120 withdrawal from an ATM a few miles away, charges at a local pizza place, an online delivery service, even purchases from a sneaker store, all under $150, deliberately small to fly under the radar. These weren't random errors. They were carefully hidden actions, the kind that betrayed both trust and intention. Helen closed her eyes briefly and let the weight of the discovery settle over her. Michael. It had to be him. For decades, Helen had kept her finances locked tight, each cent accounted for with the precision of a seasoned accountant. But this was a breach of everything she believed in, a violation far deeper than just the missing dollars. It was the betrayal of a bond she had spent a lifetime nurturing. She opened her worn legal pad and began meticulously recording every suspicious transaction, matching dates and times against the moments Michael claimed he was out or busy. Her fingers paused as memories flickered through her mind. Michael laughing over a late-night phone call, the excited glint in his eyes when he talked about his future, the warm mornings when he kissed her gently on the cheek before heading out the door. How could the boy she knew and loved have crossed this line? Helen reached for the phone and dialed Carol, her longtime friend and former fraud prevention expert. Their conversation was cautious and measured. Helen didn't divulge names, only asking for advice on tightening security and monitoring unusual behavior. Carol's voice was calm, but firm. "You're doing all the right things, Helen. Keep watch, update your passwords, and don't hesitate to freeze accounts if you see more activity." Determined, Helen spent the next days quietly resetting every password, switching to paper statements, and activating all the security alerts her bank offered. She declined Michael's requests to use her debit card, citing technical problems, all the while observing his reactions silently. But Helen didn't confront him. Not yet. Then came the conversation that broke the fragile calm. Michael, in his usual enthusiastic tone, mentioned his plans for a startup, a budgeting app aimed at his generation. He was full of ideas, promises, and ambition. And then the words came out as if casually, "Mom, it just makes sense to use some of your savings now. That money's going to be mine someday anyway." The casualness of it was like a cold wind slicing through Helen's heart. Her son, the boy she had raised with quiet sacrifices, now spoke as though she were nothing more than an ATM, a source to draw from without asking. The sting wasn't in the words alone, but in the indifference behind them, a stark realization that the boy who once sought her comfort now saw her as an obstacle or a tool. Helen felt a tightness in her chest, a moment suspended between disbelief and determination. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, trust, and protecting the life she had built. Without anger, without confrontation, Helen looked into Michael's eyes and simply said, "We'll see." Those two words carried the weight of all she was prepared to do, and the strength she would summon to safeguard herself. That night, the house held a silence heavier than usual, as if both mother and son were feeling the shifting tides of their relationship, each knowing that nothing would be quite the same again. Helen sat quietly at her kitchen table late one evening, a faint golden glow from the old lamp illuminating the neat stack of documents before her. The air was thick with a calm that felt almost fragile, as if one wrong move might shatter the careful balance she was trying to preserve. She stared at the screen of her laptop, fingers poised but hesitant, knowing that what she was about to do would mark a turning point, not just in her finances, but in the fragile trust between her and her son, Michael. For weeks now, Helen had watched the subtle but unsettling pattern unfold. Small withdrawals here, odd transfers there, none large enough to raise alarms in a casual glance, but enough to set off her finely tuned instincts. Helen was methodical. She couldn't ignore the signs anymore. Tonight she would take control. Her first step was to lock down her existing accounts, freezing access one by one. She set up new accounts under an assumed name, carefully chosen, securely established. It was her silent fortress, a safeguard built with the precision and care of a master strategist. Every detail was considered: new usernames, different banks, separate phone numbers. She wiped the slate clean of any connection Michael might recognize. This was no longer just a financial maneuver. It was a shield protecting the life she had built with decades of sacrifice. Days passed, and Michael's frustration grew palpable. Helen could feel it in the way he lingered by the computer, trying password after password with mounting desperation. His confident facade began to crack. The boy who had breezed through college with boundless energy was now tense, irritable, shadowed by doubt. Helen caught him resetting the Wi-Fi router late at night, his movements hurried, furtive. She heard the muttering under his breath as he muttered out combinations, birthdays, pet names, years, anything that might unlock the door she had quietly closed. But Helen did not confront him. She kept her routine, baking her favorite bread, tidying up the worn corners of the house, watering the small herb garden she'd planted last spring. She observed Michael's shifting moods with quiet sadness, a mixture of disappointment and resolve tightening in her chest. The atmosphere in the house grew heavy, stifling. Michael withdrew into his room, shutting the door with a sharp click that echoed through the quiet halls. He stopped joining her for dinner, stopped laughing at the small jokes she'd tell to lighten the evenings. He was a ghost, living under the same roof, and Helen felt the invisible walls between them grow taller with each passing day. Then, one afternoon, Michael emerged with a new tone, less confident, more calculated. Sitting across from Helen at the kitchen table, he looked her in the eye and laid out his proposition. He wanted to use $10,000 from her savings for his startup. His voice was steady but carried an edge of expectation, as if the money was already owed to him. Helen's heart clenched. This was more than a request. It was a demand, thinly veiled as an opportunity. She didn't raise her voice, didn't scold or plead. Instead, she reached into a folder and carefully laid out a printed bank statement on the table between them. The pages were marked with highlights, notes in the margins, showing the withdrawals and transfers she knew were unauthorized. The evidence was undeniable. Michael's eyes flicked to the paper, then back to Helen. For the first time in weeks, the mask of confidence slipped. He was silent, speechless even. The room seemed to hold its breath. Helen looked steadily at her son, not with anger but with a quiet firmness that conveyed the weight of years, the sacrifices, the trust broken, the respect demanded. She spoke softly. "Michael, I know what's been happening. I've been watching. These aren't just mistakes or emergencies. They're choices. And you never asked." Michael's shoulders sagged, and he looked away, unable to meet her gaze. The truth was laid bare, and there was no room for excuses or justifications. Helen saw the boy she had raised, now burdened by his own mistakes, the realization settling in his eyes that he had underestimated the woman sitting across from him. The silence stretched between them, heavy and full of unspoken emotions. Michael gathered himself, nodded slowly, and without a word left the room. His footsteps, once so confident and sure, now felt hesitant and weighed down. Helen remained at the table, her hands folded calmly. The confrontation was over, but the work had just begun. She knew healing would take time, for both of them. But in that moment, she felt a quiet strength rising within her, a resolve to protect what was hers, not out of spite, but out of a deep, unshakable love that demanded honesty and respect. The kitchen clock ticked softly, marking the passage of a turning point in their lives. Outside, the late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor, a reminder that even in darkness, light persists. The house was quieter than it had been in months. After Michael's departure, the familiar hum of daily life that once filled every corner of Helen's home seemed to dissipate like mist. For days, maybe even a week or two, she did not hear from him. Not a phone call, not a text, not even a word left behind on a voicemail. It was as if the very presence he once occupied had evaporated, leaving an echoing void in its place. Helen did not reach out. There were no frantic calls or desperate messages. Instead, she retreated into the sanctuary of her routines, finding solace in the small, deliberate acts that had long been her refuge. She began to clean, not out of spite or anger, but as a quiet ritual of healing. The worn kitchen counters, once cluttered with hastily placed mugs and unopened mail, were wiped down until they shone faintly under the soft overhead light. She swept the floors, each stroke a meditation, each movement a reclaiming of her space. The dust that had gathered in corners was no longer a nuisance, but a reminder of stillness, of time that could be turned inward and mended. Helen moved room by room, treating the house like a vessel carrying memories, hopes, and regrets. Bookshelves that had long been neglected were dusted and rearranged with care, the spines aligned perfectly in neat rows. Old photographs, faded black and white portraits, candid shots from birthdays and holidays, were gently lifted from their frames, touched tenderly, and placed back with a new sense of reverence. She found herself drawn to the trinkets and keepsakes Michael had left behind, small tokens of his presence that now carried weighty meaning. A baseball cap resting on a chair, a well-worn pair of sneakers by the doorway, a half-completed crossword puzzle tucked under the couch cushion. Each piece a thread in the tapestry of their shared history, and now a reminder of what had been broken and what could still be mended. As she worked, Helen's mind wandered through memories, not just the good ones, but the difficult ones too. The quiet sacrifices she'd made raising Michael alone after her husband's passing, the nights spent balancing budgets while he slept in the next room, the dreams she held for him that now felt distant and fragile. She allowed herself to feel the sadness, the loneliness, but also the fierce love that underpinned it all. Then, one chilly morning, just as spring was beginning to loosen its grip on Portland, the phone rang. Helen's heart skipped a beat when she saw Michael's name on the screen. She didn't hesitate to answer. though her voice was steady and calm, betraying none of the anticipation that bubbled beneath the surface. "Hi, Mom." Michael's voice came soft, tentative, stripped of its usual bravado. I I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything, for what I did, how I betrayed your trust. I was wrong. I've been thinking a lot." Helen listened, her fingers tightening around the phone as he spoke. Michael went on to explain how he had moved out, living now with a group of friends in a small apartment not far from her house. He talked about the work he'd taken on, manual labor jobs, stocking shelves, doing whatever it took to earn money honestly. "I needed to understand what money really means," he admitted. "Not just a number in an account, but something you work for, sweat for, something you respect." There was a pause, and Helen felt the weight of his confession fill the silence between them. "I know I can't just erase what happened or expect things to go back to how they were," Michael said quietly. "But I want to try. I want to rebuild, if you'll let me. I'm willing to do the work, to earn your trust back." Helen's heart ached with a mixture of relief and cautious hope. She knew forgiveness was not a magical reset button, nor a return to innocence. It was a path, sometimes rocky, sometimes slow, that required patience and boundaries. "Michael," she said softly, "I forgive you. But forgiveness isn't a free pass. It's a choice I make because I love you, not because I forget. We have to build something new, on respect, on honesty, on clear boundaries. That means no more taking without asking, no more crossing lines." Michael's voice trembled with gratitude and newfound humility. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not letting me get away with it, for holding me accountable. It's the hardest lesson I've had to learn, but it's the one I needed." The conversation stretched on, gentle and real. They talked about plans, hopes, and the kind of relationship they wanted to nurture, one that could weather mistakes and grow stronger through them. After hanging up, Helen felt a quiet peace settle over her. She placed the phone down and looked out the window at the soft green of budding leaves and the pale blue sky. The air smelled faintly of rain and earth, a reminder that even after the harshest winters, life could renew itself. In the days that followed, Helen continued her rituals of care. But now, her home felt less like a place of retreat and more like a foundation for something new. She began attending local community events, rekindled old friendships, and found joy in small adventures, morning walks through her neighborhood, afternoons at the library, evenings spent writing letters to friends across the country. Michael visited occasionally, no longer the restless young man who once took from her, but a son willing to show up with honesty and humility. Their conversations were slower, deeper, marked by an unspoken understanding of the distance they had crossed together. Helen understood now that healing was not about erasing the past, but making peace with it, and that sometimes love meant holding firm while giving space, protecting oneself while opening a door. Her forgiveness was not weakness. It was strength born of experience, wisdom carved from years of endurance. And in that balance, Helen found hope, a hope that their story was far from over, that the future held promise, grounded in truth and respect. The air was cool and crisp as Helen settled into the creaky wooden rocking chair on her front porch, the kind that had been with her through decades of sunrises and storms. The soft rustling of leaves whispered through the tall oaks lining the street in Portland, Oregon. For the first time in many months, the house behind her felt peaceful, not empty, but full of promise. After the storm that had shaken the fragile bond between Helen and her son Michael, life had slowly begun to unfold in a new rhythm. The sharp edges of anger and disappointment had softened, replaced by a quiet understanding and mutual respect, born from hard lessons and honest apologies. Helen had chosen not to close the door, but to open a new one that invited growth rather than guardedness. In the weeks after their difficult conversation, Helen embarked on a personal journey she hadn't expected. She started attending local community centers, joining groups for seniors where laughter and stories filled the rooms in vibrant bursts. She took digital literacy classes, determined not to depend solely on others for the technology that governed so much of modern life. Each lesson was a small victory, a reclaiming of independence. Her days were also enriched by the return to long-forgotten passions. She began journaling again, penning thoughts and reflections on pages that had been empty for years. Afternoon walks through the neighborhood became her sanctuary, moments of quiet meditation where the gentle Portland breeze carried away old fears. Evenings were spent experimenting with new recipes or tending to the small herb garden she nurtured on the back porch. Michael, too, was transforming. The reckless enthusiasm that once blinded him had given way to humility and purpose. He had found work with a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting the elderly, using his tech skills to help those less comfortable with the digital world navigate their own challenges. Each visit home brought stories of small successes and heartfelt gratitude from those he helped. Their conversations became deeper, more honest. They spoke openly about boundaries, trust, and the responsibilities that come with family and forgiveness. Michael no longer saw Helen as just a provider, but as a partner in a relationship that required care and respect. Helen, in turn, listened without judgment, allowing room for mistakes and growth. One late afternoon, with the sun dipping low and painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Helen poured 2 steaming cups of tea. Michael settled beside her on the porch steps, a quiet smile touching his lips. They sipped in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from shared understanding and unspoken love. "I'm proud of how far you've come," Helen said softly, breaking the silence. Michael looked out over the street, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "I'm grateful for your patience and your boundaries. They taught me more than you know." The warmth of the moment was a balm to old wounds, a testament to the power of forgiveness that is not weakness but strength. Helen realized then that boundaries weren't walls meant to isolate, but bridges built to connect, delicate structures that, when respected, led to deeper love and genuine growth. As the sky darkened, the distant lights of Portland began to twinkle like stars brought down to earth. The quiet hum of the city blended with the night's soft chorus, and in that stillness, Helen felt a profound peace. Her story was not one of endings but beginnings. And as she sat there with her son, bathed in the glow of twilight, she knew that sometimes the greatest love is the love that dares to hold firm and yet opens wide, inviting hope and healing to take root and bloom anew.